Okay, guys. All right, let's call the special council meeting of July 23rd, 2024 to order. There's one item on the agenda, which is discussion of Metro Vancouver governance. What I thought I would do is just outline some of the basics of the situation at Metro Vancouver to give you kind of a overall snapshot of Metro Vancouver. And any of you can weigh in whatever way you want, or, if you've got questions, of course, we can have those as well. Now, Councillor Glanders is on Zoom, so, okay. So, in terms of, and this came out of a couple of conversations where I thought the awareness of people on our council was more than it was. So we'll go kind of through the basics first. So the board composition for Metro Vancouver, it's made up of 21 municipalities, 1 electoral area, and 1 Treaty First Nations. Out of that, you've got 41 directors. You get directors, number of directors and number of votes based on population of your city. The leaders of it are the chair and the vice chair. Right now, that's Mike Hurley replacing George Harvey, and John McEwen is the vice chair. The city of Richmond gets 11 votes. So we've got 3 members. To get the 3rd member, we had to get our population based on the official census, had to go past 200,000. So we did that some time ago. And so we've got 3 members, and the number of votes are 4, 4, and 3, for a total of 11 votes. Each councillor is an alternate, so for instance, Alexa is my alternate, and the second alternate, I think, is Andy. So if I wasn't able to attend a meeting, I would ask Alexa to go in my stead, and if she can't go, it'd be Andy, that kind of thing. I passed out yesterday just a list provided by Metro Vancouver of what the committees are and who is on those committees. And there are formal or informal rules on the composition of the committees, but they don't want more. They want directors on each of them, and they want no more than the directors. They want councillors who are not on the board can ask to be on those committees. And so you'll see that, the 3 appointed directors are committee members, but we also have other people from this council on that. Those who attend meetings get a stipend, which is set, and it's unusual that it goes longer than 4 hours. If something goes longer than 4 hours, which wouldn't usually be the case unless it's a board meeting, and sometimes they go longer than 4 hours, but again, that's unusual. If it goes more than 4 hours, then there is you get another meeting fee for that. In addition to those rules, committee chairs, you get half a meeting fee per month for being the chair. And the chair and the vice chair actually get a stipend in addition to meeting fees. So they get a stipend of X dollars, and then they get up to a certain limitation in terms of the numbers of meetings. They get meeting fees. I think it's, right now it's 18. They can get 18 meeting fees. The way issues come forward is pretty much the same as it is for our council. Almost everything comes up through a committee and then goes to the board or one of the various boards. Now, in terms of the basic services, and I know there's concern about the services that are performed and the costs of that which are borne by the cities, it's actually a little bit of a different situation. In general, most of the costs that come through Metro Vancouver, one way or another, go onto the utility bills, not direct taxation. So, I mean, the one main exception is Metro Vancouver itself, the corporate enterprise. There is a tax that they levy. Compared to the rest of your property taxes, it's not a huge amount, but it is something there. And for Metro Vancouver itself, that would include the parks function, planning function, sustainability issues, air quality, and a number of those kinds of issues. There is a housing board that is all part of it. The board of that is the board of Metro Vancouver, but there's a housing committee. And when I say housing, it's not to promote affordable housing just in a general sense. There are a number of Metro Vancouver housing buildings, housing units around Metro Vancouver. Bill's on that committee on housing, and the whole idea for it is that it's revenue neutral, that there's no more taxes charged. I can say that Richmond has more of these housing operations, than almost all of the others, isn't that true? Yeah. These complexes. So, what's an example? Monado? Monado Village.
It's 836 units.
Yeah. Anyway, there's a number of those housing complexes here in Richmond. Then I'm gonna.
There's one over by Shell and Williams as well, family rental housing, Metro.
Laura, if you could put your hand up if you want to speak. I'm going to just go through this stuff.
Yep, sorry.
There's a number of them that are around Richmond. Then you've got the original utilities for which Metro Vancouver was born: solid waste, water, and liquid waste. So for solid waste, it's the cities and they're either their own operation or the contractors that actually pick up the garbage from everywhere and deal with the recycling. But Metro Vancouver runs the transfer stations. So when a load of garbage is picked up, it's taken to a transfer station, and eventually it would usually go to the Vancouver landfill in Delta. Same with recycling. We've got the recycling depot here, and we've got the green waste, of course, as well. So where the payment comes in is there's a tipping, what's called a tipping fee, that's set by Metro Vancouver. And so for every load of garbage, recycling, green waste, whatever, depending on where it goes and what it is, the tipping fee is set by Metro Vancouver. And they operate all those various functions. So you're going to see that on your utility bill is for solid waste. Similarly, you're going to see water on the utility bill. And that, remember, that's the budget that comes in first, which is around usually late October, early November. Now for the water district, not every city in the region is on water. Lions Bay, White Rock, Bowen Island are not part of the water district. But the idea is that the city buys the water from Metro Vancouver. It comes down and is processed on the North Shore. Then it comes through the pipes, goes all around the region. And the payment is made it's all metered, and its payment is made accordingly. So Metro Vancouver or its utility will set the fee structure for that. I can say that the infrastructure for water is unbelievably huge, like water pipes that are diameter of 6 feet or 7 or more. I mean, it's just huge. So you can understand to put in new stuff or to take care of the old is a very expensive process. I've been chair of the water committee for a while, and I can tell you when costs were going up, this was more last term than now, but they took a hard look at the infrastructure and they cut back on what they didn't really need at the time because the expenditures are so huge. And looking into the future, one of the big projects is the Coquitlam Reservoir over on the North Shore. They're adjusting it. Now, when I say they're adjusting it, this is huge, the process for this. But if you've got a lake like this and you're taking water out of here right now, okay, you need more water, so you take it out of down there. And that's what they're doing, is they're putting in the infrastructure so they can take more of that water. And water, because you know, the water is so plentiful in the winter, it just works out. It will work out. Then we have liquid waste, and we're going to talk more about specific liquid waste functions in a minute, or challenges anyway. Again, you don't have all of the cities on it. You don't have Lions Bay, Bowen Island, Belcarra, or the Tsawwassen First Nations. Liquid, like for water, everything is one district. For liquid waste, you've got all these smaller districts. So Richmond, for the most part, all the solid waste or the liquid waste goes down to the end of Gilbert to the Lulu Island wastewater treatment plant. And historically, going back a long way, we were part of Iona, but only a very small part of Sea Island goes to Iona anymore. Iona is mostly for Vancouver and Burnaby. Where it gets complicated for liquid waste is the operating and capital costs. So within Lulu Island, okay, just take this as the example. We pay all the operating costs for that facility. And then for capital costs, they've broken it down into tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. And I can't give you an exact definition because it's so lengthy and complicated for what's tier 1, 2, and 3. But tier 1, the local district pays 100% of the capital costs. Tier 2, it's 30, the locals pay 30% and the region pays 70%. And for tier 3, which is just some sustainability stuff, when I say just, it's for the new plants, we didn't have to go to what's called tertiary, which is the highest level of processing for the sewage, but we wanted to, and it's called tertiary. That's all those costs are tier 3, and that's the prime example of it. Now, going on to the challenges that I see going forward, and that all of us are involved in it. The biggest challenge is the capital financing. And the biggest challenge we've got right now is in liquid waste, where you've heard about the North Shore Wastewater Treatment Plant and what has happened there. Okay, so looking at that plant and what's happened there, they brought in federal regulations about 15 years ago that said that any sewage that was going directly into receiving waters, oceans and stuff, had to have at least secondary treatment. So you've got primary, which Iona has now, and Lionsgate on the North Shore has now. Then you've got secondary. So you have to go to secondary, and we've decided to go to tertiary. That had to be complete by 2020. Well, it's now 2024, and you know the situation. But the feds have been relaxed about it. They know we're doing what we can. The budget started off at $600 million for the North Shore plant. It then went up to 1.1 billion, and you've heard about the ballooning costs up to 4 billion. Now, in terms of public conversation about this, I'm very much constrained because there is some humongous litigation that is on right now between Metro Vancouver and the contractor and involving various other people. So that constrains our discussion with it. But I can tell you that in terms of the oversight of that, shortly after Jerry Dobrovolny, about 5-6 years ago, became the CAO of Metro Vancouver, he formed an infrastructure group within staff at Metro Vancouver. And they are very experienced and expert at various infrastructure projects. So they have been up to their elbows in this project. And also on the North Shore plant, there's been an expert panel of about 5 or 6 different people, some infrastructure people, some engineers, there's some lawyers there, probably accounting people, just a different assortment of experts who have been overseeing the whole situation. When it became a real challenge and we were making that increase in the budget, a task force was formed, which you may have heard of. And that task force met a number of times to review the project and the cost escalations of it. We couldn't meet in public because of the presence of the litigation. So now, and this is something I circulated to all of you, is the report that's going forward this Friday, where the chair is bringing forward a report to have what is called a performance audit performed in relation to the project. And he's made a recommendation as to who could carry that out, et cetera. So that's the latest. Now the next one is Iona. Iona, the original idea was that North Shore would be built by 2020. Iona was to be by 2030. The preliminary cost projections for Iona is almost, call it 10 billion. It's within a very small amount of 10 billion. Right now, they are in the process of the early design work. I can tell you that our staff has been involved with the project because it's in Richmond particularly. And of course, Metro Vancouver staff is highly involved in it as well. The first issue that they came across was they want to have a barge terminal so that they don't have to bring in all the concrete and other supplies by road. And so there was a lot of discussions. They wanted to set up a barge terminal at YVR, and mostly people from South Vancouver were complaining about that. I think there were some others, maybe the Musqueam as well. Anyway, I think that's either being discussed or has been largely resolved. Okay, so the final thing I want to talk about is, because we're talking about challenges, you have the North Shore, you have Iona. One of the biggest challenges that I believe we have is a suggestion by some of the members of the board at Metro Vancouver that instead of having one sewage district like we have for water, for liquid waste we have all these districts, we should have one sewer district. Did I say that correctly? We have one water district, and the idea is to go to one sewage district. Is that a good idea? I have said it in open, so I can say it now. I am very concerned about that suggestion. I think Richmond going back to the history of Little Island wastewater treatment plant, that was brought in the early 90s. And there was a big discussion because there was not only that going on, but there was major upgrades to the Anasis wastewater treatment plant in Delta. And the suggestion was made at that time, apparently, from what I can gather, that we would go to a single sewage district at that time. And according to the notes that I've seen, though they're only at the administration level, but I think probably the elected people were the same. It was Vancouver and the North Shore that did not want a single sewage district, thereby making, I remember I went through, if it's in our district, we gotta pay tier 1 100%, 30% tier 2 and all the operating costs. So we've been paying the extra costs on Lulu Island for 30 years. And I've made the point in public that if it's a good idea to go to a single sewage district, it should have been done 30 years ago. And so there has to be some very major cost adjustments as the result. So I don't know exactly when we'll launch into that discussion. I know that staff is examining the issue. We will hear more about it. So who knows? Anyway, so that's my long-winded explanation of kind of the basics, or just a nutshell version of Metro Vancouver. So I'll be happy to answer any questions or you weigh. Okay, Councillor Fallon. Okay, Cash.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for the explanation. I think it was very worthwhile to hear some of this. And I just want to start my remarks by saying that this is not personal to anyone. Yes, I've been commenting mainly from an accountability point of view with Metro Vancouver for the past few months. You've heard me be part of a group to call for auditing, and as you mentioned, Mayor, there were the cost overruns for the North Shore wastewater treatment, and to be cognizant of cost overruns for the Iona plant that we're looking at. These issues seem to be ongoing. You've given us a bit of an advent of what led us to where we are right now, and I certainly appreciate that. That bit of communication, which would have been helpful when I started here in council. But again, I do have some prepared remarks, and I'm just going to read them out, and then I've got a couple of issues I'm going to bring forward, Mayor, and certainly others on council, including yourself, can respond to it. So I just want to read this out. Again, please don't take this personal. Over the past few months, Metro Vancouver's board has faced numerous inquiries regarding their responsibilities, from procurement issues to cost overruns, CAO compensation, opulent international travel expenses, governance challenges, and lack of transparency. These issues have lingered without satisfactory resolution to some of us. It is evident that the public's expectations have not been met. There are growing demands for higher authorities to conduct audits on the significant cost overruns thus far and to guarantee the credibility of future project cost estimates and completion dates. I recognize the fiduciary duty of the elected officials comprising the board. Their primary duty is to act in the best interests of the public and prudently manage the resources entrusted to them. This includes making decisions that benefit the region and community, considering all stakeholders' needs, managing taxpayer funds efficiently, prioritizing the region's long-term well-being, and upholding ethical standards with honesty, transparency, and accountability. The region requires several crucial infrastructure projects, such as the Iona Wastewater Treatment Plant project in Richmond, which will impose a significant financial burden on the taxpayers. As a council, it is imperative that we ensure Richmond is represented by directors on the board who align with the majority reasoning of elected officials. We must guarantee that these elected officials fulfill their fiduciary duty to serve the public interest. And I'm going to comment a little bit on fiduciary duties. And as you know, being part of a board, and I'm part of the Econ board, I certainly recognize our fiduciary duties when you sit on these particular boards. However, the reason I'm on Econ board is because council wanted me on that board. The second reason is I would never lose the fact that I was elected here in Richmond, and that's the reason why I'm on the Econ board. And I can be easily removed from the Econ board by the wish of council. But my fiduciary duty, in my opinion, and on my research, is that it is to the people of Richmond, and I'll continue to operate in that. What is very concerning, Mayor, is you've told us, or told me, a lot about Metro right now. In the last few months, I've learned about Metro mostly through the 6 o'clock evening news with respect to some of the issues that are going on. When I look at the numerous committees, and I believe there's an excess of 15 committees at Metro Vancouver, I have to question whether that is the best value for the taxpayer or the utility payer, as you've mentioned earlier. The fact when you look at some of these committees, such as Climate Action, you have 15 representatives. Liquid Waste Committee, we have 15 representatives, including one from Richmond. And of course, the Mayor's Committee, which I strongly believe the mayors should be part of Metro and accountable to their various jurisdictions. I understand that completely. To this very day, I have yet to see any documentation with respect to what goes on in those committees, and I understand there is a report that comes forward in our council package with respect to Metro Vancouver. But from the committees, I've yet to hear anything. I know Councillor McNulty did talk about Monado Village based on its housing committee, but on the other committees, I haven't heard anything with respect to what's going on, so I really question that. You mentioned performance audit. And I just want to draw your attention, Mayor, because I think this pretty well says a significant amount on the way Metro Vancouver operates. And it's on your board package on page 71. And I want to draw this to your attention and get your opinion on this as a representative. Your Metro board package, page 71, where it talks about the performance audit. Now, I just want to read a part of this which should concern everyone. And this is, I believe, from, yes, it is Mike Hurley, the board chair of Metro Vancouver. And these comments: as board chair, I am proposing to my colleagues an independent advisor and a process for the development of the scope and terms of reference for the independent performance audit. I recommend the appointment of William Peter Joseph McCarthy, as he is uniquely qualified to conduct a thoroughly independent, high-level investigation of why and what transpired with regard to the North Shore wastewater treatment project. We need to know and learn from this experience. This is the most, this is the most significant part that we should be concerned about. This next paragraph. I have known William McCarthy for several years. He is a lifelong Burnaby resident and is extremely community focused. His biography, experience, expertise, and credentials speak for themselves. He is fully independent and focused on all matters and is extremely analytical and detailed in his work. He follows the facts and presents his conclusions fairly and thoroughly. I believe he would be able to assist Metro Vancouver in a way that would be of lasting benefit to our board and those that represent. when you look at this individual's qualification, yes, he's got significant degrees behind him. Yes, he does have real estate practitioner experience and some of the other experience. Carrying on with what Chair Hurley has written, costs of the independent performance audit will include the independent advisor's professional fees and necessary disbursements, and the external counsel's professional fees and necessary disbursements. The total amount is not known at this time. So it appears, based on what Mr. Hurley has written here, is it's a friend of his. It's a Burnaby resident. And is that the qualification and the process we go through to get someone that's going to do a performance audit? Based on my experience in my work in government and trying to deal with some of the conflict of interest issues, I really question whether this is something that we should be admiring based on some of the problems that are occurring in Metro Vancouver.
I mostly agree with what you say. I don't have a lot to challenge there. I don't know whether Bill or Jack want to weigh in. But what I do want to say, first of all, before we get to this independent performance audit, you get a board and brief. I mean, the process for what you hear from Metro Vancouver is actually fairly extensive. You've got not only the representatives to the board, the meetings are open, they're live streamed. You get a board and brief a couple times a month, which extensively tells you what the decisions are that have been made in open meetings. We consult with staff on the substance of those reports. And of course, the fiduciary responsibility that you talk about is to that organization. And I believe that you must have a regional focus at that board, and TransLink is really the same. But you have to have a regional focus on it. But what you say is accurate in the sense that I never forget that I'm from Richmond. And when I talked about the single sewage area, I'm telling you that we're going to have our own point of view on that, and that's going to be a biggie. In terms of this independent performance audit, I just remind you, Mike Hurley has only been there a little while. This is yet to go to the board. I circulated this because I wanted you to see the approach that is now being taken, but it hasn't been debated by the board. And, you know, we'll see where it goes. Did you have a comment? Go ahead. Just a minute.
I just want to draw to your attention, this was off the public package that's out there that I was able to
Well,
obtain.
you got it
So
because I put it in your box. I had,
I never did get it. I got it a couple of days ago.
from me. That's,
No,
yes.
no, it must be still in my box then.
Have you?
But the
Have you
point,
all seen this? You got it from me.
yeah.
Okay, you may
Okay,
have gotten it
we can
somewhere
argue
else.
back and forth, but I know where I got it from. So the point I want to make here, Mayor, is how, you know, and I respect your work you've done over the years here, and I respect the fact that you're representing Richmond at Metro's board. The concern I have just with this particular issue, you've heard those other
I've heard
issues.
that.
I've talked to you before. Is there is a significant concern, and I hope that our three representatives at Metro Board, when you meet on Friday and it's discussed, certainly pay attention to things like that. Those are the issues where our constituents lose confidence in the Metro Vancouver workings.
I can tell you I've already had a conversation about that very point. And frankly, a couple others. Let's see, Carol, Councillor Day.
Thank you very much, Mayor Brody. So I did get the memo, and as I was reading it, I thought, wow, this is really an important vote. I mean, it's A, B, C, D, and E that you guys are asked to vote on Friday. But under normal circumstances, we don't see any of this. And it seems to me that stuff like this should go through council so that we can give direction to the 3 directors who have those 11 votes. Why does that not happen?
Because, because the law is that we have to represent Richmond and the region as best we can. If we are not bound by a council vote, okay, we aren't. Obviously, if I know that our council thinks X and I just ignore it, you know, there may be issues there. But you do get advised after the fact through the board and brief. And frankly, that has not been a document that has been very often commented on by the various councillors. So you put me, if you think that I can circulate the entire package, my package is literally this thick this week. I don't think it's productive, but I do circulate it to staff. We go through it. Jack and Bill and I talk about it. We sit together. It's rare that we disagree on particular issues, almost always voting the same way. So there's only so much we can effectively do, is my short answer.
Yeah, I spoken to Bill about this earlier, and he did say that staff review that big package and then give advice on how you should vote. It just, these are important issues, and it just seems to me that, you know, council should have more of a say. But I suppose council can attend the meetings, I understand. Any councillor can attend an open meeting, but not a closed meeting.
Right, you can either attend in person or you can, it's all live streamed. So you can go on and take a look at what's going on.
Well, and you know, Councillor Heath just, I think today or yesterday, sent out a report of what's going on in ECOM, and I think that's really important, and I read those, and it helps me understand what's going on over at ECOM, and it sounds like the numbers are way up, and they're dealing with it, and I'm really happy to hear that, because the public does ask those questions, but we rarely get a report from Chuck, Bill, Alexa, or you.
Hold it a sec. He reports after the fact.
Yes.
He doesn't circulate it beforehand and say, what do you think?
Okay.
You get a board and brief that is extremely thorough and extensive. That is with the minutes every second council meeting or so. So, yes, you do. You get a full report.
So that's the full report, those 4-page, like, it's usually not it's super involved, the board and brief.
Actually, it is. It's a good, accurate, and extensive summary. So I think in that sense, it's probably the same.
I had a couple other questions, if that's okay.
Yep.
In the case of Metro Vancouver, the chair, which currently is Mayor Hurley from Burnaby, makes all of the appointments for the committees, and you were kind enough to send us this long list. And that doesn't seem very democratic. Why couldn't there be a process where, number one, all of the directors have some say, or number two, that why can't the boards themselves choose their own chairs and vice chairs, whereas Mr. Hurley does that as well?
It's similar to the local process. The standing committees are appointed by the mayor who designates chair, vice chair, and members on the committee. It's the same way at Metro Vancouver. It's by legislation.
And then you sent out a list, which I actually had already made one, and I see that the mayor is on 8 committees or boards. Councillor McNulty is on 3, Alexa Liu on 2, and Chaka only on 1. And I spoke to Nikki over at Metro Vancouver, and she was very, very helpful. And she said that when you have a board, if there's going to be 8 people, 4 of those people have to be, 50% have to be directors. So when Councillor Au is only sitting on one board, he then limits the amount of opportunities for other councillors to then join in. For instance, Alexa Liu is able to join in on 2 of the committees because there's enough directors sitting on those particular committees. And so I wonder if we as a city shouldn't require that if you're going to be an appointed director, that you should sit on a minimum of 3 committees.
We can't determine that. That's in the purview of the chair. And when you talk about the number that I'm on, okay, caucus of committee chairs rarely meets. Finance is a critical one. Financial plan task force is finished. George Massey Crossing Task Force, that's similar to the city process, and I think you'd want me to be there to chair that. Where else? Invest Vancouver, that's just something that's new, and I've hardly been to that at all. Of course, the Mayor's Committee, I'm on that. And North Shore Wastewater Treatment Plant Program Task Force is finished. That was the review of that. This list was given out a few months ago. And Water Committee, I chair that. So if you don't care for the way the chair does it, it's certainly within your rights to send them a note and say, hey, or phone them and say, hey, what about this? But I also say that there hasn't been a lot of interest shown until the last 48 hours by councillors at this table to be on those committees.
I can speak for myself. I simply didn't realize that there was opportunities. And when I saw that,
I can tell you that you've been asked verbally and you've been asked by memo. And I can show you the memo if you don't believe me.
is there any interest in Metro Vancouver to modernize the system at all?
It depends what you call modernizing. That is, for standing committees, it's like the locals. That's the way the legislation reads. I don't know what you would suggest. I don't know what you'd suggest.
Well, I would ask that the directors and the council members that are on the various committees do provide a report, such as Councillor Heath provides with the econ. It'd just be really nice to know in detail what your perception is of how things are going, and maybe alert us to the voting patterns, for example.
The voting patterns will be a matter of public record, and committees, everything goes to the board. I mean, I'm sorry, I don't mind telling you about it, but I think you're duplicating the effort there. Okay, Alexa. There you go.
So I think most of you have all been to the Council of Councils, and there's opportunities to ask questions there. There's information that goes out ahead of them. There's the Metro Vancouver website. I don't know if you've spent any time on there. There's the biannual water report, biannual liquid waste report. There's a number of reports that come out. They're big reports, so they're not always printed. I think sometimes there were printed copies kicking around that came to City Hall every once in a while, but because I've seen them at some point. But I get my agenda electronically, so they don't print it up for me. So all the agendas are online. So if you're not a board member, you don't have and you're not on that committee, you don't have access to the closed material, and you won't have access to the closed material. And that's one of the reasons there is a lawsuit actually going on right now, because someone who wasn't supposed to have access to some closed material got access to it. So they're very particular about that and very tight. But the open agenda packages, you can go online and get them a week ahead of the meeting, and you can peruse them at your leisure. And if there's something you want to share and say that you have an idea about how that should be voted on, you can. I agree with Cash on this one, that what is suggested here isn't necessarily the best plan. Obviously, going out for a request for proposal, hearing from all the different accounting firms, that stuff, and letting them bid on it and allow this guy to bid on it as well, and then make your decision after who you're going to hire, makes the most sense. I think there's enough accounting firms and or engineering or whatever. There's all kinds of people who have the capability to bid on that job and prove their worth and organize it accordingly. Obviously, this guy seems very educated, skilled. He seems to have done everything. Like, he's been in the army. He has done, I don't know what he hasn't done, actually. He hasn't given birth, but that won't preclude him from doing the job properly.
May or may not.
Well, not that particular item, I think.
Oh.
But, so, anyway, yes, I think that, sure, it's easy to get wowed by this guy's background and all his different abilities and what he could do. That being said, it seems to me that going to request for a proposal, and if the people representing Richmond on the board were to ask, that's what I would recommend. Or if I read it and then had this suggestion, I wouldn't feel phased to come and tell you guys what I think, that you guys, chat with you guys what you're planning to do and where I think the best route is. I think we have that relationship that we can have that discussion and say, hey, seems to me the meeting's on the 26th, you're going in. If you think I'm wrong, tell me. We can discuss further, but thank
Yep.
you.
Let's see, who's that? Andy?
Thank you, and through the chair. Yeah, just a couple comments. One, the one sewage district idea that's apparently floating around, no pun intended. I think that, yeah, that is a big issue. So that'll be interesting to see how that conversation goes. Regarding the issue of this candidate for the performance audit, along the lines of what Councillor Heed and Councillor Liu have already said, when I read it, I wasn't actually that wowed. I mean, there's a lot of things that have been ticked off under this guy's name, and probably a great person. But my concern is more along the lines of kind of what's been said. Like, what was the process? You know, what were the RFPs, or how were expressions of interest gathered from suitable people? So that's one thing. And then what's the vetting process as a part of that overall process? How were people vetted? Were people vetted? How does this person stack up against other people that may have applied or may not have applied? And then when it gets down to it, I would think if I was on a board, like you three are, I'd want to see who the top candidates were and have a discussion about that and kind of do some vetting at the board level as well. So what I'm getting at is along the lines of what Alexa just said, is when you have this discussion, it's not a reflection on the individual. For me, it's more about the process. What was it? Who applied? How were they vetted? Because from what I saw, there was just one name put down in front of us, and it sounds like an okay person, lots of education and things ticked off, but actually very heavily on the real estate side as well, is what I thought. So I'd be very interested to know who else applied, and I think there should be a more robust process to get as many qualified candidates as you can, or firms, and then make the selection from that. So I would hope that the three of you can carry whatever message you choose to carry to that board discussion, and not just sign off on anything too hastily, because it is a really important task that has to be done. Cash was talking about it a bit, but the level of public confidence or lack of confidence in some of the things that have occurred, I think it's really important that we do everything we possibly can to restore that confidence. And this audit is one piece of that, a very important piece. And so getting the right firm or person after the right kind of process. And this sounds like it just reads like it may have been a little short-circuited as far as a process that I'd like to see to come out with the final selection. Thanks.
Yeah, I don't, and we're gonna go to Michael in 1 minute. I don't disagree with what has been reflected here about that performance audit. Yet it hasn't gone to the board, okay? And it's almost unique in that respect. Very rarely does that happen. When I heard and saw this, my reflection was that we should have a finance committee meeting to hammer out that kind of detail and information and so hopefully get to a point where it's, the process is fairly smooth once it gets to the board because you've, just like we do locally here, we just have that robust conversation at the board or at a committee. So in any case, I can assure you that I have heard what you say, and I can assure you that I don't disagree with it. And there will be discussions. There will be discussions. Councillor Wolf.
Thanks. Just a couple points I'll add on. Looking through the list of Metro Vancouver committees, one thing that stood out to me was that we have only the 3 directors and Alexa Liu who have any positions. But if you look at Burnaby, they have 8 different councillors. Vancouver has 9 different ones. Surrey has 8 different ones. Some cities have 2 on the same committee. I think we're selling ourselves short here at getting coverage and having influence in the region and helping our existing councillors learn the process instead of just putting the same people in for a 4-year term. Mayor, you mentioned that you said in the last 48 hours you've seen a lot of interest. Well, when I first got elected 6 years ago and then this re-election 2 years ago, I expressed a long list of things that I would be happily appointed to, and that's like all the advisory committees. But I also gave you the list of almost all of these committees that I would very gladly get your approval if that was what was needed to get on. But you're saying now that I don't even need to ask you. No. I can go, so then, then Alexa didn't ask to be on those 2. She just went directly to George Harvey.
I assume that there was some communication. I think Alexa was on a committee or 2 the last term as well. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, it wasn't anything to do with me.
Okay, well that was definitely not communicated clearly to us. And I think it's been a negative impact then on some of us. I've spoken to him directly and mentioned the names of these committees that I would be on, and I wasn't given any other direction at that point, so.
Well, I'm sorry to disagree with you
Yeah,
on that.
okay, good. And then when it comes to board and brief, I'll disagree on that too then with you, because I think it's very ineffective. We get this little paragraph summary of what happened at that committee on that item, but nothing related to Richmond, nothing, no one who was there at the meeting gives us like, oh, this one was actually heavily debated, it was a split vote, here's how the Richmond vote went, here's why we voted. I think some of these items, when I look through and I comment on them at some council meetings, I think they really should have more involvement before going in so that we can pool our knowledge and get a better outcome perhaps. And also after the fact, rather than just let it slip away as in the minutes. So I think we don't do a good job of that at this table. And then, yeah, so I think I've expressed my interest. I think we need to shake things up, so.
All right. Okay, so other comments, concerns, questions? So that's what the situation is.
I have
Oh, I'm sorry, Laura. Yeah, I meant to go to you. Go ahead.
That's okay. Yeah, it's a good discussion. People make some really good points. I'm also concerned about that appointment for the auditor. It just looks kind of, this new chair got elected and then he's putting his friend in. It just doesn't look good. It doesn't instill confidence in the people. And my question is about the travel expenses. We heard about the mayor's trip to Amsterdam, and I heard a comment that it was worthwhile because the mayor's learned about different methods of disposal, including some green methods. And I'm just wondering, does that mean that all the mayors are going to be co-authoring a report to whatever engineers are going to be doing Iona and whatnot, and making that trip worthwhile that way? Like, what? Is it just worthwhile to know about it, or what's going to actually come out of that?
The only reason I think that Amsterdam got kind of emphasized was because George Harvey was part of that trip and then he pulled out. But I don't think in concept that trip is any different than any other. And there's a long list of them. They all go through Metro Vancouver. There is a report that will go to Metro Vancouver after after the trip is concluded, and that's in the process of being written as we speak. So, yeah, we'll hear more about that. I can tell you.
Okay.
Any other comments? Question? Yeah, Bill?
Yes,
And then we'll go to Chuck.
yeah, thanks.
There you go.
Thanks very much. I know there's some very good comments around the table, and I agree with many of them, but I think we have to put things into perspective of what we're dealing with as a metro region. You know, we've got 23 independent organizations coming to the table with 41 representatives and all having different point of views. Just making the last comment that X city has X number of people on X committees. Well, I put my name forward to the committees that I felt were important to Richmond. And I'd take Richmond's perspective there and also bring our perspective back to Richmond when it's discussed. Councillors have only so much time. I'm there 4 mornings a month. I don't know how often the mayor's there. Jack's there, and Alexa probably at least 2. I don't have any more time. I've got liaisons just like the rest of you. And I bit off just what I could because I thought they were important. We could have a reporting back in the old, like we had the old days, called Good and Welfare, where we took time, and every time Carol went to Stevenson Harbor Authority, never had a report yet, Carol, from you on the Harbor Authority at council. I'm just trying to put this in perspective and not a criticism. I'd like to hear what happened at the Harbor Authority Board, and that you would like to hear what happened at the Housing Board at Metro Vancouver. I haven't brought you I keep talking about at council, my accessibility committee and all the good things that are happening there at council and open, and to say how good things and all the good work that Richmond's doing, and all of you praise the report that we put forward the other day, because that came from downstairs, from 15 individuals in the community. So I guess it's one of time, and my binders, which I've been reading, as Malcolm says, for Friday is this thick. We're looking at a regional focus here, and I think that's important. We have to take things into consideration and where we're sharing information and what have you. I'm disappointed to hear that the board and brief is not a good document. I don't know what you want, but I really, and I'm not criticizing, if I was to write you a report every month like that, that's what you get from me. So I guess that wouldn't be good enough. But I want to know what you want from that we are able to give to you. And there are issues, okay? And the whole region's talking about it. Everybody's jumped on the media bandwagon on what's happening. Yeah, there's some serious things, and we've got to deal with them. This is not acceptable to send it out. I'll be quite frank with you. He's made a major mistake as a new chair, in my opinion, to automatically suggest we deal with somebody before the board has met. This is his perspective. I respect what he's put, because he's entitled to do that. I can't see this being approved, but that's just my own personal opinion at this time. I don't want to know how I'm going to vote on it. We don't often get the full story, and when we're on this and have coming on and dealing with the mayor of the situation, for example, on the North Shore. We've only been involved for less than 2 years. There has been a lawsuit, which we didn't know, and I can't say too much about anymore going on. I toured the plant over there, and while I was walking, we literally had 1,400 inefficiencies put on by the previous contractor. As we walked, we could look the cracks in the wall, this, that, and the other thing. And that was public. I'm only giving you what's public, okay? The other thing is, in my opinion, is got to look at what happened between 2016 and 2020. We did not create the $2 billion, $3 billion because we haven't had a report at the board level. Am I not correct? And as such, because we haven't voted on it, there was some information maybe that was going on 2016 to 2020 that people need to focus on. It's interesting, when I looked at that, that's when did it start and how did it perpetuate? So, but it did start before us. With that lawsuit, and like I said, information got out, and we'll see what happens on that. I think that we can have input. I get input from the staff every time I go. They read the agenda. They send me notes and say, yeah, Richmond's position is here, and we're doing this already, etc. Not everybody at those committee levels is on the same level. For example, climate action, in the flood committee I'm on, we are so far ahead, and Harold used to say this as well, we are so far ahead of the other 22 regions in some areas. And I'm not bragging or anything, just making a point that we're talking about. If we're talking about housing, for example, this is the first time in a number of years that the Metro Housing Committee was able to come up with enough funds to start looking at, in an orderly manner, dealing and refurbishing Monada Village. They've done Kingston Gardens. They built 2 units in downtown Vancouver off, I believe it's Drake and Georgia down there. They've built in Burnaby. They're looking to move affordable housing into areas where they haven't got any, the Pitt Meadows, the Maple Ridge, etc. We've 836 units in here, and I think it was mentioned over in Shell Road, down in Monada Village, and the co-ops and stuff. So those things are being discussed. I'm not defending it. I'm just trying to give hopefully a regional perspective. The big issues, we have to go there to make sure our taxpayers are judiciously represented, okay? And the taxes are not hidden. We voted against the last time they wanted to raise the taxes, did they not, Your Worship? What was it? To give North Shore residents $528 a year free taxes off it, and ask Richmond to double its contributions for the North Shore to help pay for the deficit that's there. We voted against it. It was not in the best interest of our people, and I would vote against it again. We did at one time, as His Worship said, historically ask for an equalization. Vancouver and North Shore threw it right back at us. I believe George Peel was the chair of the Metro at the time. Was it Greg? Our own, okay, wow. Okay, you know what happened there. And I'll leave that. So I think there can be some improvements. I don't think every community is having this kind of discussion, so I want to thank Cashin for bringing us forward like this. I'll guarantee you Surrey's not having this discussion. I'll guarantee you New Westminster's not having this discussion, or Maple Ridge. So I thank you for it, because I think this kind of talk is healthy. You know, if we're not talking about it, and we've always had an open book, always transparent, and always represent the taxpayer on the bottom line. So, you know, whatever we can do, any good things that we can have here, it would be good if we can take those to the board and put them on the table there and say, you know, we had an open discussion. It was suggested that you can do it individually and collectively, but we can put some things together to say there needs to be better transparency, there needs to be better this, there needs to be whatever on it. And on it, there is still, well, I don't know if there's still opportunities for committees, but they're still available, or may be available. And everybody had their opportunity to put their name forward and on it, and go onto a committee that they might like, et cetera. And I think it's always good that we go outside our boxes to get a different perspective from a regional focus. Instead, I sat on ECOM, now my colleague here has taken over. I made sure that Richmond's perspective and south of the Fraser was always represented, and the taxpayer, as I do. Very often at housing, there will be nothing, for example, I'll just use that, about Richmond for 3, 4, 5, 6 months. And then finally something comes up because we're talking about the region as a whole. So anyhow, Your Worship, just to put a few things in perspective, maybe with some help, if we want reporting back, maybe we do the good and welfare, where we report. It's after public announcements.
I don't think that's the idea of good and welfare.
Well, and we create one to report back. I'm just looking for an opportunity if other members of council feel we haven't reported. I think it may be a good one.
We get the board and brief. If you're not satisfied with the board and brief, you can request a copy of the report, which you'll be given. And if you want to discuss it, that's fine as well, whether you want to discuss it privately or you want to discuss it at the board table or at the council table. Councillor Allen.
Yes, I think this has been a very good discussion, and then some things can be easily addressed. But reflecting upon my experience on the board, this is my first time being a director, and also the first time that I was a member of any committees. In the past, I have applied to several times to different committees, and I was never appointed. Of course, I was not given an explanation. And even at the beginning of this term, I applied to 2 or 3 committees, and I was going to be appointed to the parks. And probably because I am the chair of the city's Parks and Recreation Committee. So I don't know the process or how they make the decision to appoint committee members. And being a director, I of course have some observations and reflections on how things are going or how things have been conducted. I think first of all, this is a very complex and complicated organization. The organization itself, the structure, and also the way different cities participate is already complicated. And one thing I noticed is that because of the size of the organization and the geographical differences, we do not have a chance like this that we can really, councillors sitting together, having informal discussions or exchanges of opinions, while having coffee. So on those meetings, probably, you only meet those people during the meeting, and then after the meeting, everybody was quick to go. There's no chance for really informal, touching base or sharing ideas. So I think that itself is one shortcoming of the meeting itself or the structure itself. And secondly, I think is when we sworn in for our position as directors, we're given clear indication that we have to see things from the perspective of the region, and we sworn in on that basis. However, I think, again, it's easier to say than done, because, there are always tensions and conflicts of interest between the region and the city. And sometimes I can see that kind of division on the board as well. And in some meetings, you can see the clear division. Somebody's taking care of the regional interest first, and some directors might be, very firm on, okay, this is what I have to do for my city, for the benefit of my citizens. And I think how to draw that kind of balance is actually not easy. Regarding on the transparency and the reporting back, I believe that for the open meetings, from what we have so far, I think that is sufficient transparency. And their channels to get information and perhaps bring up issues based on the board in brief, those kind of information. I think councillors ask questions. I did ask questions before, when I was not a member of the Metro Vancouver board. I asked questions based on those minutes or information. And regarding committee meetings, as well as the board meetings, we always got professional advice or backup from staff before the meetings. As Bill mentioned, we got information from staff, or sometimes comments, or some reminders of what are we doing here in Richmond, what could be the point of conflict with the direction that the Metro Vancouver board is going. So I think in terms of backup, I think we also got very good professional backup from staff. And if I'm just speaking for myself, if somebody wants to have information regarding what's going on with the Parks Committee, I think Councillor Wolf and I, from time to time, we talk about issues that I have on the Parks Committee. And he asks me questions, I share, what I can share. And I think that the other thing I think we can be easily done is that we can share the minutes of meetings or those committee meetings easily. I think that's not a big problem.
Okay, Cash?
Just quickly, Mayor, just want to push back on my good friend Bill McNulty over there. You are getting compensated for that meeting versus Carol doesn't get compensated. So just be cognizant of that going forward. Mayor, I think part of the issue is the governance model, and I'm hoping that you, as a director, are really going to focus on whether we need that governance review there. We're on a very historic model that's been around since the GVRD, and whether it needs to be fixed or just reimagined whatever way we can to make sure at the end of the day that the transparency and accountability, I think those are key factors going forward. In my last comment is related to what Councillor Wolf had to say, and I can tell you right now, when he read out those numbers, I was very surprised because I did not do that addition to determine that. In whatever way you can, Mayor, to advocate for, at this point, for our councillors here in Richmond to be on those committees, to represent Richmond on those committees would be very, very helpful. I have no interest at this particular point, but I know other councillors around the table have an interest. So, my encouragement is to advocate for them and let's get them on the committee. I think that'll go a long ways in ensuring that we have the current model working the best it can for the people of Richmond. Thank you.
Yeah, I've spoken to both Councillors Wolf and Councillor Day about communications with Metro Vancouver to indicate an interest and to see what can be done as far as that goes. Okay, we've got Councillor Day, then we got Councillor Hobbs, and you're Jack. Okay, I think we want to move this along. Go ahead.
Yeah, I have to leave in about 5 minutes. Can I make a request then that we get the board in brief, which is in our public council meeting package? Could we also have a board in brief that's in camera, that is in our in-camera package?
No, and let me explain that. I personally have no trouble giving you all the in-camera stuff. Because of the leak that happened on the North Shore, confidentiality has been, well, it was compromised and it has been tightened enormously. The Metro Vancouver is very strict about giving out, even to have staff look at those reports or comment on them or to print them out. So I'm sorry, I can't guarantee you that.
Okay.
Yeah, oh yeah. Oops. Counselor Hobbs.
Thanks, and through the chair, two quick ones. With the committees and the timelines, and I guess director appointments too, is it typically just for the 4-year term? You do it for a whole term and it stays that way? So,
Typically.
yeah, so typically. So my question about committees, you know, along that line, is there an opportunity for people to join committees halfway through a term?
Let's
So they-
ask.
So we can ask and follow up, and we will follow up on that?
Yeah.
There are a couple of committees
Well,
that are short.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And the other
That's
factor
that's
is,
a good point.
and the other factor is you've got a new chair. And
Yeah.
I'm sure that maybe not this minute, but
Sure.
soon, that's going to be looked at.
That would be good. And then just the last comment I want to make is, yeah, this meeting has been very informative and helpful. And actually, it's kind of like, for me, an orientation. And so that's something that maybe we could follow up on post-elections, especially for new counselors. But I learned through repetition, so it'd be good for me too, to have an orientation of some kind about Metrovan, because a lot of information when you first get elected, especially. Anyway, just food for thought.
Yeah, and I'll even say you may want one on TransLink.
Yeah, right. Thanks.
Jack?
Yes, well, Malcolm, actually, my question to you is that you have been on the board for many decades.
Right.
And so, my question is the fault that the current structure and formation has always been like that, or what has been the changes over time? You know, how you come to
Well, okay. It's mostly been the same in the sense that liquid waste, water and solid waste are all legislative functions. And so they have, that has changed very little. Where the change has come in is in the Metro Vancouver itself function. They're doing much more with parks than they used to, with regional planning, sustainability, with their, well, all those kinds of things are far more active than they were when I first joined the board.
Okay, so in that case, are you saying that if somebody has to suggest a review or even a change of the structure or the formation of the board, it has to go through a very complicated or even legal process?
It would have to, there would have to be, liaison with the province. But I just also want to make the point that they've talked about one of the terms of reference for this performance audit, whoever does it, however it's done, is to look at the governance issues, whether the governance contributed to whatever happened. I don't know the answer to that.
Okay, good, thank you.
All right, anything else? Okay, guys? Yep, we're now adjourned, if we're okay.